Hello and good day, everyone. This is Ahlzen, and I hear you have a rather pressing issue at your table. Someone has to DM, and whether by choice or force, you find yourself here for advice on how exactly to do that. Don't worry, I'm here to help. The job of the DM sounds like a daunting and overwhelming task, and I'll let you know now that if you want to be considered an awesome DM, then it can be. It doesn't have to be, though. One thing to remember before you even start is that your first several games will likely be amidst friends. If they're your friends, they're not going to be hypercritical of your growth as a DM, but may make suggestions. So that leads me to my first piece of advice. Listen to your players. If they're not having fun, then you should try to figure out what you can change to make sure that everyone's having a good time within your story. Reading an audience while trying to keep things within the playing field of your story can be very difficult, so if you're struggling with that, then don't be afraid to pick a random friend at the table and talk to them away from the game to ask what you can improve for them. You have to start somewhere, and this is a start. If others know you're talking to them and making adjustments, they'll feel better even when things aren't as fun from point to point for them. The first several episodes of this series will go over things like world building, character design, story themes, campaign design, encounter building, and checks and balances that will help you as a DM keep things on your end tidy so that your players think this is somewhat easy for you, despite the fact that, to be perfectly honest, you might struggle to think of things from time to time. Again, I'm here to make the process easier, more fun for you, and overall to help you move things along at the table. So if you have anything in particular you want to ask, you can do so in the comments on my Discord, or you can even ask smaller questions over on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Ahlzen, where I'll be happy to assist you. Without further ado, let's get into it with my first piece of advice. World building. The first thing and the most daunting task that a DM has to worry about is what world is my campaign going to be set in. From your one-shots to your grand campaigns, the world sets the tone. This doesn't mean that you can't have a bit of goofiness in a grim Lovecraftian horror fantasy setting, or that you can't have a seriousness in a world where chickens explode when they come in contact with water. What you are aiming for here is the general tone of the world. I know what you're thinking. I don't have the ability to remember everything about my world, and the idea of designing every city, every NPC, every blade of grass from scratch is horrifying. That is horrifying. So why are you doing that? It is far easier for you, as the DM, to start small and build up from there. Don't think of things like a massive pre-established map that you, as some intrepid explorer, went through first and ordained where the party is going to go. Look at it on a much simpler level. Like a Lego construction, you must start with your first brick before you can build the whole thing, right? So do that. What will your first brick be then? I advise these at starting. The tone. What sort of tone will your world be set in? Do you want something dark and mysterious where terror lurks around every corner for those who are not vigilant enough to avoid it? Something more action-packed but dangerous, where your average farmer spends more time stabbing goblins with his pitchfork than hay bales? Maybe it's a little more mundane. Magic is rare, and the life of an adventurer is difficult, but worth it to those who partake on the trade. This should be your first decision as a DM, and one of the most crucial ones, because once you set the tone of your campaign, straying too far from it can break immersion. Your tone can be a little more flexible than a theme, though the two are often used synonymously. The tone is a more specific point in time within the overarching theme of your campaign. To which we get to the theme of your campaign. The theme of your campaign can be a little bit more flexible than the tone. Your theme, I would argue, might need to be more consistent than the tone, because while the tone can change from session to session, the theme describes the general feeling that the player should have while playing your campaign. Your horror-themed campaign won't have 20 sessions out of the 30 wherein they fight a giant mutated snake named Bob who can cast color spray when he farts. But if the tone isn't too tightly gripped to the theme, it can let your paladin get in that funny one-liner when the party slays the Medusa who's been turning the missing children into statues in her garden, after the party discovers what's been going on. Some common themes are the same as genres, from action to adventure, horror to comedy. Decide what you, as the DM, want to tell in your story and what your players will like to see, and most importantly, talk to your players. A player who just wants to have fun and laugh and troll around will not have as good of a time when doing so, will result in a TPK every single time because you've decided everyone in town is alike and they just don't much care for those dog jokes. The setting. The setting of your world is pretty important. Is it set in a high fantasy setting where everyone has access to lamps with a light enchantment on them and Clockwork horses? This is often the easiest question to answer and even easier to change as the players explore the world and discover new locations, especially new countries. One of the most wonderful things about world building is that by changing the setting up a bit when players explore new countries within that setting is that you can splice in some of what they've already experienced into the whole new world to explore within your own continuity. The high fantasy and super magical country can most certainly be juxtaposed by the next country where the people there are impoverished and sickly as a plague has been spreading through their streets for almost a decade. They have what few magical items that they could afford to import from the other world and require much assistance in ending this blight. It's also a great excuse to simply change the environment around the players from something more classically Western medieval to an exotic Egyptian-themed desert town. Your setting is not as fluid as theme or tone, but it does narrate the world around the players to help them build an internal visual of where they're at. One of the things you should look to for helping to build your worlds from campaign to sprawling backdrops is other media forms. You should avoid taking direct rips from other media, but a little Easter egg sprinkled here and there is always nice to tickle the nostalgia button a little bit. For instance, the overarching tone of the Resident Evil series is one of dread and terror. The setting is more modern. The theme is clearly horror. However, all of this is wonderfully broken up by moments of pure adrenaline-pumping action and hilarious B-movie style one-off lines. Isn't that right, Jill?
Come on! Next time, take the fucking hit!
Leon?
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
I think one of the best parts about those 3 points above is that you can create an immersive and intriguing or fun story by simply wrapping your head around those 3 concepts before you put anything to paper. Which reminds me, you need to take notes. A lot of notes. Inside and outside of the sessions, remember to keep notes about your thoughts on the campaign and your perceptions of how people are handling things. This lets you make adjustments to the campaign itself, to characters they encounter, or to how the players can interact within your world so that everyone, including you, is having fun. Now let's not start off huge. Your players won't clear through the first town you made if you don't let them, so let's start off there, yeah? Let's get your first town built, and what we'll do is walk you through my processes while this video of me designing it has been running in the background. Building your first village. So first we have to come up with a name. Now, you should pick a name that fits your setting and theme of your campaign, but otherwise, any name will do. Can't think of a name? Come back to it. It'll come to you, trust me. For instance, this village I'm designing is named Zinkara. I'll explain the reasoning for that name here shortly. The first thing I had to decide when I am building Zinkara is, what sort of place is it? Where is it? How big is it? What's its economy like? What's the economy based on? Given the world it is set in is a high fantasy world where magical items tend to be pretty plentiful, but dangerous creatures are also almost as common, the village was built off of the trait of hunting dragons and their kin. This isn't some feudal village anymore, though. Set in the crater of a massive meteor, this will be where my players start off at and is their childhood home. Not entirely closed off from the world thanks to travel and trade, but isolated enough that, within the scope of the player characters who start here as children, it is their world. The village has been growing exponentially since the development of a world tree from the meteor. Moreover, because the world tree sprouted from a meteor of adamantine, the village has, since its development, begun to create weapons and armor and trading those instead of the scales and claws of dragonkin, since they learned to cultivate it without harming it. As such, druidism and shamanism are key factors in the belief structure of the villagers. They worship the tree and the prosperity it brings, and the only reason that the people aren't more wealthy than they already are is because to do so would require taking too much from nature. Now let's break that down so you can see how I got to this story of a wondrous place beneath the shade of a world tree and the crater of a meteor in the mountains. Settings. The setting for Zinkara is a Western medieval one, so the people there live in decently structured houses. They don't die of heat exhaustion in the summer, and they don't freeze to death in the winter despite the bitter frost that the winter likely brings, being as they are in the mountains. Most structures are made of wood, most paths made of dirt. They're wealthy but not lavish. In fact, I have chosen to spice things up a little bit and make the place more magical and mystical by dictating that new homes are shaped into being by the druids and shamans of the village. The theme. The theme is that of a high fantasy world where adventure awaits for those growing up in Zinkara. For now, it is a cozy and comfortable place where the children can laugh and play, and it's safe from harm within the crater. A lone watchtower used to keep an eye on the fields of razor wheat for fires during the summer, and of course, to keep scoundrels safely tucked in their beds instead of pestering the chief. The tone of the campaign has not been set yet. A good craftsman always waits to unveil his creation until the time where it is right. You do not have to do this though. You can feel free to set the tone right away and maintain it throughout your story, but you will find the best stories have their twists and turns. To create a village like this, you should follow a sort of spreadsheet-like formula to it. This will help building new villages, towns, even sprawling cities like those you see in D&D canon. However, I rarely operate within other canon settings as I prefer to let my creative mind flow and homebrew every place, person, and event. This isn't to shun the DMs who would prefer to play in a setting like that of Baldur's Gate, Fallout, or Cyberpunk, though. Everyone has to start somewhere, and not everyone is as creative as the next. We all have our styles, and it's perfectly acceptable. I hope you enjoyed this somewhat rudimentary beginner's guide to world building. In the next episode, we'll go more in depth on the development of Zinkara and the spreadsheet I mentioned before, so you can invent beautiful, grueling, or intriguing places of your own. We'll be starting at the humble village and build out from there so you can follow my process for developing a whole world like this one. So if you enjoyed this content and would like to see more of it, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss these helpful tips from a DM with almost 12 years of experience under his belt. You can also find me on TikTok and Twitch under the same name, where you're free to ask me your more pressing questions, which might give me ideas for more videos. You can find me on X, Twitter, under Ahlzen, or tag me directly with @ApochLord, because apparently I can't change that. And of course, you can join my Discord, where I hope to create a community of individuals who enjoy my content and want to help each other out with all things D&D, gaming, and even help with smaller things like advice on whether you should feed your dog chocolate. You shouldn't. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Ahlzen, signing out.